It's been an amazing undertaking because, first of all, with most cases, they don't have any type of publicity that this one has. And they don't have any social media presence. On occasion, you might look around and see what other people say about your case or what's happening in social media, but never have we had the type of attention or focus that this one has had. And of course, even more uniquely, never have we had a situation where we've actually involved ourselves to a certain extent in looking and watching social media, and to a small extent taking part in it. So it's very unique.
Do you think that it has helped or hurt your case here?
Oh, I think that if I could do away with all media, including all social media, that I would not have it involved in a criminal case, quite honestly. But that's a fantasy that is 40 years ago. With that, because the concern that I have, of course, is it has any potential for negative impact hurts a defendant. So I don't like that part of it. Yeah. But having said that, you know, the reality is it is here to stay. So a good criminal defense attorney, any good attorney with a high-profile case is going to have to know how to handle it and know how to respond to it and know how to involve themselves in it to the extent that the ethical rules suggest it appropriate. Sorry.
But you've used social media to your advantage as a big fundraising tool for your client as well.
Sure,
so,
absolutely.
I mean, you can't really have it both ways, or can you?
Like I said, 40 years ago, there was no media in the courtroom. There's no question that in 2013, social media is here to stay, and therefore our involvement with social media and all media of all sorts is here to stay. So having said that, there's no question that we can take advantage of those opportunities. One, to look at the Gentile case and figure out how under those guidelines we can get our response to a prosecution, sometimes an over-prosecution, how to get that out to the public, because we're entitled as defense attorneys to do that. And very uniquely, we've used a website and social media to actually request or to at least have a vehicle for donations. Amazing, but I think even that's sort of here to stay.
What are you expecting to happen on Tuesday?
We have a number of hearings, a number of motions set. 2.5 motions for sanctions against the state for what I consider to be an extraordinarily frustrating amount of discovery concerns. So we're going to have to address that. The state has some issue regarding my client's decision regarding the immunity hearing. We may address that. And just basically, we need to also plan to the extent that we can with the judge what's going to happen in the next 6 or 8 weeks, because we have a jury to pick in what has been termed, I guess, and rightfully so, one of the most high-profile cases in the country right now, and that is going to impact on our ability to pick a jury, so we need some really good guidelines on that.
Before you made it sound like it was really, that you were kind of behind schedule preparing for this case, or where do you feel like you are basically 8 weeks out?
Well, if I can have another 8 or 10 or 12 weeks added on top of it, there's probably that much more work to be done. Having said that, on the other hand, this is a case where the event happened in about 5 minutes. Strangely enough, it was recorded in a number of different ways, so the facts are available to us pretty quickly and pretty easily. If it wasn't for the intense coverage on this case, one, there might be the suggestion that Mr. Zimmerman may never have been charged. But having been charged, it would have been a case where we probably would have addressed this matter in a self-defense immunity hearing, and it would probably have gone away at that point. Realizing all of that, the enormity of the workload that we have is in dealing with some of the extraneous, the peripheral information that has been generated by this case, and that's what's taking a lot of time.
Why is it important for you to have Trayvon Martin's cell phone records?
Well, because it's part of any evaluation that we do. Unfortunately, we can focus on, you know, a deceased 17-year-old and say that we should completely respect the family in their loss. And I understand that. You know, having done this for my whole life, I represented victims in many, many cases. I represented defendants in many, many cases, and I understand the sensitivities of each. We live in an open society and in a state where there is very open discovery. And that open discovery not only allows us, but mandates that we do what we can to zealously represent Mr. Zimmerman. And just as the state went and got his school records, and the state went and did a complete download on his phone, we have the same rights. Now, is that an intrusion of privacy? As I said, if I could have it where there is none of that, I think it would help the system, and I think it would probably help individual criminal defendants. But we're not there, it is malpractice for me not to look at social media. It is malpractice for me not to take advantage of phone records that exist or information that is resident on the phone that we have subpoena powers over. So the question really becomes how you balance the sensitivity of a deceased person's family with the Sixth Amendment right to properly defend my client. And I think we're trying to balance that properly, but I also believe in my heart, and with 30 years of criminal defense experience, that the Sixth Amendment says I have an obligation to zealously represent Mr. Zimmerman, and that means to get to every piece of evidence that I can find.
Do you still want to talk to Mr. Crump, and what do you want to hear from him? What do you want to know from him?
It's very simple. Mr. Crump has intentionally made himself a very significant witness in this case. The fact that he is an attorney protects a certain amount of that. And quite honestly, we're not seeking to get after anything that is otherwise protected. If he wants to come in and say it's attorney-client privilege, he will and he should. If he says it's work product and that's accurate, then we can't get to it. But when you have an attorney, or let's just say he wasn't an attorney, who comes out and makes certain statements to the public, who presents a certain picture, which is at least seemingly a very focused view, if not an inaccurate view of the facts of the case. And then he says things like, I know that Norm Wolfinger and Chief Lee had a conversation that night and decided not to charge George Zimmerman. Well, those two parties who are supposed to have that conversation strictly deny it. I would like to know where he got that information from. Similarly, when he says Sanford Police Department is racist in the way that they handle a case and they didn't do this right, and I know that they said they were going to do this, that helps the defendant. So I want to know that information, and if Mr. Crump is the vehicle for that, then so be it. Most importantly, he put himself right in the middle of the investigation of a very significant witness and did it in a way that caused more questions than answered. I think you would probably agree, maybe not, that the way the interview was handled has caused more questions and more concerns than it answered. I would like to have the entire 25-minute tape that ABC had, because it listed everything that was said and everything that wasn't reported to have been said. Not having that affects my client's rights. So I'm frustrated about that, and Mr. Crump hopefully can answer some of those questions. That's why. A standing ground hearing is not proper. You know, that's one of my pet peeves. Self-defense immunity hearing is really what it should be called, because that's what the statute suggests. But the reality is we've decided not to do a pretrial for a number of reasons, and we'll sort of handle that as it comes up. We have a trial scheduled for June 10th. We'll sort of figure out how to present what we're going to present then.
Wouldn't that resolve your discovery issues, though? If you had the hearing, isn't everything that you're seeking discoverable at that hearing?
No, it doesn't resolve a lot of my discovery issues, because some of the discovery issues that we have are outstanding. Example was Mr. Crump is still a discovery issue. That's not resolved. Some of the frustrations that we've had that led to the motions for sanctions dealing with the delay in getting it. You know, I know that people have complained and said, well, just go do your work. And I get that. But when it takes me 6 months to get a picture of my client, full color picture that the state had day one, and first I get, and I know you hate hearing this, first I get the black and white, then I get the color copy. Then finally, after motion and order, we get the actual picture. If that doesn't speak volumes to the media, then you need to look closer. Because if I were to do that, look closer at me, because that's not the way you're supposed to handle discovery in Florida. Prosecutors and defense attorneys are supposed to seek justice, not just convictions or acquittals. And hiding the ball is not the way to handle any case, never mind a high-profile case.
What was the prosecutor saying that he was inappropriate?
Oh, in my recent response? Oh, I don't know where to begin and where to end, but my understanding of both the case law, our rules of ethics, our rules of professionalism suggest that we are not supposed to take personal attacks to anyone, the judge, witnesses, defense attorney, or the prosecutor. And I think that there's really good reasons for that. This is already enough of an adversarial process. And what we really want to do is try and keep some semblance of sanity and justice, and most importantly, the people's respect. Because I have to imagine that anyone who would look at that pleading and say, this is the way lawyers treat each other, would say, I have no respect for this system if you can say what was said in that pleading, and that's the way they treat each other. Rather, I think we have to maintain the respect of the courtroom and the respect of the profession, because we have taken on an enormous responsibility as lawyers. We tell people to believe in us, believe in our system, come to us with your grievances, and we will respond to them properly and we'll resolve them properly. A pleading like that just tells them that we're in a sandbox throwing dirt at each other, and it's just, it demeans my profession, and it demeans the process. So that, were that to continue, then no matter what happens on the trial, people might not believe that a just result was accomplished, whatever that result is, if they lose respect for the lawyers or for the process.
Real quick, what's the
Last
impact
question.
of Mr. Zimmerman being in court on Tuesday? What do you need him there for?
Well, it's funny, the state has now requested his appearance. We had already decided a couple of weeks ago, because we had waived his appearance at the last few, that because of some of the significant issues we're going to address at this hearing, that he was coming anyway. So I don't consider it to be particularly significant. It's actually usually more significant to waive your client's appearance, but because of the security concerns and just the focus on this case, we had done that in the past. So my plan is that he'll be there, and we'll see if there's going to be any inquiry at all. So I think I've taken my time, and Mr. Crump is here now, so we're going to have a few minutes to speak with him, I think, unless there's a little...
Thanks, Mark. Yeah.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, I was going to say.
How you doing, Mr. Crump?
I'm well.
You're here to talk about how social media has played a role in your case, in the case. So how do you think it has helped or hurt?
No, I think it helped. First of all, I think it's important to know how we got involved in social media. We didn't engage social media. It's almost as if social media engaged us. When this case happened, we got the call from Tracy Martin talking about his son being killed, and that he was killed by a neighborhood watch volunteer with a 9mm gun, and they were not going to arrest him. I told him he didn't need me on this case. As a court official, I honestly believe that the police were going to arrest him, because it's an unarmed dead kid on the ground. You got to arrest him. So I told him he wouldn't need me. I told him, give it a couple of days, and I think you'll see the system will work as it always does. When people kill unarmed people, they are arrested. Well, what ended up happening 2 days later, he called me and he said, Mr. Crump, I told you they said they were not going to arrest him. And I had to apologize to him. He was right, I was wrong. And so at that point, we did a press conference at Attorney Natalie Jackson's office, and we were expressing the outrage and concern that you can kill an unarmed kid and go home and not be arrested. And when we did that, then the police department had a press conference saying they were not going to arrest him. And that's when the social media took off. It wasn't anything that we started or we engaged. It was people who were outraged about what happened. It was a law student, a white law student at Howard University, who started a Change.org petition that said, justice for Trayvon. We at least have to arrest the killer of this unarmed kid and bring him into the court of law. And that petition became the largest petition in the history of Change.org. Over 2.2 million people signed that petition. And that was started not by us, but by a student. This was an organic movement that the people just started saying, we want to make sure that there's equal justice. That law student found a voice. That's what I think social media has done for so many of the people who are tweeting and on Facebook and all blogging and commenting about the matter of Trayvon Martin and George Zimmerman. And then you look at the Million Hoodie Rally. That was all students. It was something that was very grassroots oriented, and it's still grassroots oriented. I think what this whole matter has done has allowed people who normally would not have a voice in matters like this. They would just watch and probably have emotions but won't be able to comment and such. Well, social media has given them that avenue to even engage you all. You know, as the media, you all are very powerful, very influential, and a lot of times they didn't have a way to communicate with you. But that's what social media has done. And I do believe this is the new way that people are going to engage legal matters. I think the precedence has been set, and I think it will never be like we were used to before the Trayvon Martin case, when you have big legal cases.
Mr. O'Mara basically said that if this was 40 years ago, he wouldn't be standing in front of us even having a case right now, saying that because of social media, because of the media coverage, that it's definitely hurt his case, and he doesn't even feel that he would even be, you know, representing his client right now if it wasn't for that. What's your reaction to that?
Well, I think if it was 40 years ago, we do have a similar matter with Emmett Till. And I think a lot of people are coming out on social media and commenting because historically they have seen what they believe to be grave injustices and not have a voice, not have a say-so. And they will see people that they identify with in their community be victims, and the system does not work for them as it worked for others. So therefore, I think social media has a role. Everything evolves. Everything evolves. And I think when Emmett Till case was there, had there been social media, had there been the influence of the people having a voice, I think we probably would have seen different results in that case. And now with Trayvon Martin, over 50 years later, it's a historical landmark matter that is going to really, really impact jurisprudence in America forever. I think that because social media, because all these multitude of issues like stand your ground, profiling, equal justice, these issues are going to be prevalent now, and we already see it in Jordan Davis' case, Ernest Hoskins' case. Now people are finding their voices.
But how do you feel about the defense wanting to depose you?
Well, Valerie, I think it's not a good legal precedence, not for the profession and not for this case, but we respect the rule of law, and if the court was to say that I had to give a deposition, then I imagine the precedent would be set, and I would be asking for a deposition of Mr. O'Mara as it relates to what he knew about George Zimmerman's jailhouse conversations and the money and the passports and things. I just think it starts a bad precedence. It's irrelevant. It gets us off of focus what the issue is in this case, and that is what happened on February 26, 2012.
So, Mr. Crump, what's your reaction to the defense wanting Trayvon Martin's cell phone records?
Well, I think it's irrelevant because of this. George Zimmerman did not know who Trayvon Martin was the night he got out of his car and decided to pursue Trayvon Martin. And so I think it's somewhat irrelevant when you really think about why does that matter. George Zimmerman only saw him walking down the street. He didn't know anything about his social media, didn't know anything about his cell phone records, didn't know him from Adam. All he knew, he had on a hoodie, he was walking home, he was walking. That's it, nothing else. So I think the state and Mr. O'Mara are going to argue those points, but from the family's perspective, we think it's totally irrelevant.
It's about 6 or 7 weeks until this trial begins, jury selections. Between now and then, and during the trial, what's your role, since you're not necessarily trying or defending this case or anything like that?
You know, that's a good question. When Tracy Martin and Sabrina Fulton engaged us, we were just trying to get justice for them. That's it, just trying to get justice. It wasn't anything about a civil case, it wasn't anything about trademarks or anything like that. We were trying to help this family get justice, and that was it. And so we started trying to put the facts and say, this is what happened, and people started reacting. Now, when an arrest was made, we made a conscious decision, Attorney Natalie Jackson and Attorney Modaris and I made a conscious decision to move back. And we said, now that they have charged them, the state and Mr. Zimmerman's lawyers, they will engage in the process. Well, there were times when we believe Trayvon Martin was attacked, his family was attacked, and we had to represent their interests. And so we will represent their interests throughout this process because we, as lawyers, understand that's our role. They don't understand a lot of these things that happen. You know, the media, when we trademarked his name, that was a legal decision to do that. That wasn't the family's decision because we saw people out there using his image, using his name in terrible ways. And so we said, well, let's make sure we trademark so we can stop people from using it in very irresponsible ways, as well as trying to profit off of a tragedy like this here. And so that's why we trademarked. That was a legal decision. That's what lawyers do. You know, people don't understand a lot what lawyers do. Sabrina and Tracy are still grieving about their son who's never coming home. And so all of this here, you know, they want justice for their son, but at the end of the day, they know nothing is going to bring their son back.
Last question.
Mr. Crump, is there, excuse me, any additional information about the case that hasn't been entered into evidence as of yet?
We know most of it, but the state and the defense know everything. I would imagine, to borrow a line from William Faulkner, it's going to be a long, hot summer in Seminole County come June 10th, and it's going to be a lot of information that comes out, and the jury, as all of America and all the world, are going to be focused on what happens in this matter because it will be a historic reference point in American jurisprudence. And all the world is watching because they want to see if everybody gets equal justice in America. And so I'm sure the jury, when they hear all the evidence, they will base their verdict on the evidence. And America, we will respect the rule of law. And Tracy Martin and Sabrina Fulton and Trayvon Martin's family has asked that everybody respect the rule of law. They don't want anybody to try to take the law into their hands because they never wanted the killer of their son to take the law into his hands. We have police officers for that, and we have a court of law, a rule of law that should reign supreme.